The mansion exhaled silence. 3 black SUVs disappeared down the gravel path. Their headlights carved through the evening mist, then vanished completely. Dr. Park stood at the entrance, briefcase in hand. He didn't look back at the estate looming behind him. All 40,000 square feet of imported marble, hand-carved wood, and bulletproof glass. He simply shook his head. The treatment has failed. Those 4 words had emptied the house faster than a bomb threat. Within hours, the phone stopped ringing. Politicians who once begged for meetings deleted contact numbers. Business partners suddenly forgot addresses. The dozen bodyguards who swore blood oaths began checking their bank accounts, transferring what they could steal before anyone noticed. The empire of Kang Do-hyun, a name that made grown men stutter and government officials sweat, crumbled in a single afternoon. Not from a bullet, not from a betrayal, from a diagnosis. The master bedroom occupied the entire east wing. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Seoul skyline, a kingdom of lights he'd once controlled from the shadows. Now those windows only showed him what he was losing. Kang Do-hyun lay beneath silk sheets that cost more than most families earned in a year. His body, once feared, once capable of violence that haunted men's nightmares, had betrayed him completely. The rare autoimmune disorder had no name in most medical textbooks. It attacked slowly, methodically, shutting down systems like a patient assassin. Fitting, he thought bitterly. He'd sent enough men to early graves. Now his own body was returning the favor. A visible tattoo ran along his collarbone, traditional Korean characters intertwined with Nigerian Adinkra symbols. The ink had been done in Lagos 15 years ago, during a blood oath with partners who are now dead. Power, heritage, control. The tattoo meant nothing now. Footsteps echoed somewhere in the distant hallway. Do-hyun didn't turn his head. He'd stopped expecting visitors 3 days ago. The door opened quietly. A woman entered, not through the main entrance, but through the service corridor. She carried a tray with covered dishes, moving with practiced invisibility. Amina Okoye had perfected the art of being unseen. 29 years old, Nigerian, employed as domestic staff for 18 months. She knew every corner of this mansion, every hidden passage, every secret room the other employees whispered about. She also knew better than to look directly at the man in the bed. "Your evening meal, sir." Her voice was soft, professional, distant. She placed the tray on the bedside table. Steam rose from beneath the silver cover, a delicate soup made from a recipe she'd learned from her grandmother in Lagos. Do-hyun didn't acknowledge her. This was their routine. She brought food. He ignored it. She collected the untouched trays hours later. Amina turned to leave. "Why are you still here?" His voice cracked from disuse. When had he last spoken aloud? 2 days? 3? Amina paused at the door. Her hand rested on the frame, slim fingers marked by years of honest work. "Someone has to be, sir." She left without waiting for a response. Do-hyun stared at the covered tray for a long time. 17 employees had resigned in the past week. His accountant had fled to Singapore with documents that could bury him. His lawyer stopped returning calls. Only the maid remained. He didn't understand why. He also didn't understand why her simple answer made something crack inside his chest. Someone has to be. When had anyone last stayed simply because they should? Please like, share, and subscribe. The soup grew cold. But for the first time in weeks, Do-hyun actually considered eating. Morning light crept through the heavy curtains. Amina moved through the mansion's lower corridors, her cleaning cart squeaking softly against the marble floors. The sound echoed in spaces that once buzzed with activity: assistants, guards, cooks, drivers. Now she cleaned alone. Her reflection passed through a gilded mirror. She barely recognized herself anymore. The tailored maid's uniform, the practical low bun, the careful blankness she'd learned to wear like armor. Once, she'd worn silk gowns to embassy parties. Once, she'd laughed freely in rooms full of powerful people. That was before. "Mama?" Elijah's voice came from somewhere ahead. Amina's heart stuttered. She dropped the cleaning supplies and moved quickly, her flat shoes silent against the stone. "Elijah, where are you?" No answer. She passed the library, the empty dining hall, the music room with its untouched grand piano. Then she saw it, the East Wing corridor. The door to the master bedroom stood slightly open. Her blood froze. Every staff member knew the rule. The East Wing was forbidden. Approaching the boss's quarters without summons meant immediate dismissal, or worse, depending on his mood. And her 7-year-old son had wandered directly inside. Amina pushed through the door, prepared to grab Elijah and run. What she found stopped her completely. Elijah sat cross-legged on the floor beside the massive bed. His school backpack lay open, colorful books spilling across the expensive carpet. He was reading aloud. And then the little prince said, "What makes the desert beautiful is that somewhere it hides a well." Do-hyun lay propped against silk pillows, his gaunt face turned toward the child. The morning light caught his features, sharp cheekbones, hollow eyes, skin stretched too tight over bone. But something else caught Amina's attention. He was listening. Actually listening. The tattoo on his wrist was visible as his hand rested against the sheets, dark ink forming patterns that told stories of violence and power. Yet his expression held nothing dangerous. Only exhaustion. And something that looked almost like wonder. Elijah noticed his mother first. "Mama." The lonely man was awake, so I'm reading to him. Amina's throat tightened. "Elijah, you can't be here." "Why not?" The boy's voice held genuine confusion. He looked sad. Nobody should be sad alone. Do-hyun's eyes finally moved to Amina. For a long moment, neither adult spoke. She expected anger. Cold dismissal. The ruthless authority she'd witnessed from a distance during her 18 months of employment. Instead, his voice came out rough. "Quiet. The boy has good taste in literature." Elijah beamed. "I told you she'd be mad, but you said it was okay." "I did." Do-hyun's gaze remained on Amina. If that's acceptable to his mother. It wasn't a question. It was permission being asked. Amina had cleaned this man's private spaces. She'd overheard phone calls that would put people in prison. She'd seen the fear he commanded without ever raising his voice. Now he was asking a maid if her child could read him stories. "Elijah." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You need to ask before entering rooms." "I did ask. He waved at me through the window yesterday." Amina's stomach dropped. "You were here yesterday? And the day before?" Elijah said it like the most obvious thing in the world. "He's been watching the birds alone." "That's sad, Mama. Birds are better with company." Do-hyun's expression flickered. Something passed through his eyes. Something Amina couldn't read. "Your son," he said slowly, "is remarkably observant. He's also remarkably disobedient." Perhaps. A ghost of something crossed his lips. Not quite a smile. "But he's the only person in this house who doesn't look at me like I'm already a corpse." Elijah tilted his head. "What's a corpse?" "Nothing you need to know about," Amina said quickly. She moved toward her son, intending to guide him out, apologize, and pray she still had employment tomorrow. Do-hyun's voice stopped her. "Let him stay." Amina turned slowly. "Sir?" "He can finish the chapter." Do-hyun's hand moved slightly against the sheets, not commanding, but almost hesitant. "If you allow it." Elijah looked up at her with those bright, trusting eyes. Eyes that saw good in everyone, even when it wasn't there. "Please, Mama?" He said he never had anyone read to him when he was little. The words hit Amina somewhere deep. This man, this feared syndicate leader, had never had bedtime stories. She thought of her own childhood in Lagos. Her grandmother's voice reading folk tales by candlelight. Her father acting out characters until she laughed so hard she couldn't breathe. Simple things. Precious things. Apparently, things that money and power couldn't buy. "One chapter," she heard herself say. Elijah's face lit up. He turned back to his book immediately, finding his place with small fingers. Amina moved toward the door, but something made her pause. Do-hyun had already turned his attention back to the child. His features had softened, just slightly, just enough that she noticed. For a moment, he didn't look like a dying crime lord. He looked like a lonely man grasping at something warm. She closed the door quietly behind her and leaned against the wall. Her hands trembled. What had just happened? The black Mercedes pulled into the mansion's circular driveway at exactly 4 in the afternoon. Seo Min-jun stepped out, adjusting his designer cufflinks with practiced precision. His reflection slid across the car's polished surface. Handsome, sharp-featured, every inch the successful businessman. 38 years old. Do-hyun's right hand for 15 years. The man who handled negotiations that couldn't happen in daylight. The man who'd been waiting for this moment. The house manager met him at the entrance, a nervous man who'd somehow avoided fleeing with the others. Mr. Seo. We weren't expecting. Is he conscious? Sir? Do-hyun. Min-jun's patience was thin. Is he awake? Yes. The doctor visited this morning. No change in condition. Min-jun smiled. It didn't reach his eyes.
Good. Prepare the study for me.
I'll need access to the financial records. Sir, the boss hasn't authorized. The boss, Min-jun interrupted softly, is dying. Someone needs to ensure the organization survives his passing. The manager swallowed hard. Of course, Mr. Seo. Min-jun walked through the mansion's main corridor, noting the dust accumulating on surfaces, the reduced security, the overall decay of control.
Perfect.
He'd cultivated relationships throughout the organization for years, made himself indispensable, learned every secret, every weakness, every vulnerability. Do-hyun had been a necessary stepping stone. His illness was simply accelerating the timeline. A child's laughter echoed from somewhere above. Min-jun paused, frowning. Laughter? In this house? He followed the sound up the main staircase, past the gallery of portraits, toward the east wing. The forbidden zone. The door to the master bedroom stood partially open. Min-jun approached silently, old habits from years of operating in shadows. He could see them now. The boy sat on the edge of the massive bed, small legs swinging. He held playing cards in his hands, giggling at something. And Do-hyun was smiling. Not the cold, calculated expression Min-jun had seen during negotiations. Not the predatory satisfaction that followed successful operations. A genuine smile. Tired.
Weak.
But real. You're cheating, Do-hyun said, his voice stronger than it should have been. Am not. The child's denial was unconvincing. You're just bad at this game. I've never lost at cards in my life. First time for everything. The boy slapped down a card triumphantly. Mama says everyone loses sometimes. It builds character. Do-hyun's smile widened slightly. Your mother sounds wise. She's the smartest person ever. She can cook anything, and she knows all the good hiding spots. Min-jun's jaw tightened. This was unexpected. He'd planned for a man succumbing to despair. A leader too weak to resist a gradual takeover. An organization that would transfer seamlessly to new management. He had planned for a child somehow piercing the armor that everyone else feared to approach. He hadn't planned for hope. Min-jun stepped away from the door, his mind calculating rapidly. The child was irrelevant. A temporary distraction. But the mother, the maid who'd stayed when everyone else fled, she might complicate things. He pulled out his phone, dialing a number he rarely used. I need background information. Nigerian female, employed as domestic staff at the main residence. Name, Amina Okoye. Everything you can find. He paused, watching the closed door. And find out why she really stayed. Later that evening, Amina stood in the commercial kitchen, stirring a pot that had simmered for hours. The spices filled the air with warmth, ginger, garlic, traditional herbs her grandmother had shipped from Nigeria. She'd started making this soup 3 weeks ago, when she'd noticed the trays returning untouched. Western medicine wasn't working. Maybe home remedies would. Footsteps approached from behind. Still here, I see. Amina didn't turn. She recognized Min-jun's voice from staff meetings, from late-night arrivals, from conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. I work here, Mr. Seo. Most workers prefer getting paid. He moved closer, positioning himself where she'd have to see him. The organization's finances are complicated. Paychecks may be delayed. I'm aware. Yet you remain. His tone was curious, probing. cooking special meals for a dying man, allowing your child to disturb his rest. Amina's hand tightened on the wooden spoon. Elijah doesn't disturb him, doesn't he? Minjun leaned against the counter, arms crossed. A stranger's child, wandering into the private quarters of the most dangerous man in Seoul. Some might call that convenient. She turned now, meeting his gaze directly. What are you implying? Nothing. His smile was sharp. Simply curious why a Nigerian maid with a young son would work in a house most people avoid. Why she'd stay when the money stops. Why her child seems so comfortable with a man who's built an empire on fear. Amina held his stare. She'd faced worse threats than suspicious men in expensive suits. Elijah sees good in people. It's his gift. Or his mother's agenda. The silence stretched. Minjun straightened, adjusting his jacket. I'll be managing affairs during Mr. Kang's illness. All staff questions should come to me. He paused at the doorway, including questions about continued employment. He left without waiting for a response. Amina exhaled slowly, her hands still trembling. She recognized danger when she saw it. Minjun wasn't simply taking over. He was eliminating obstacles. And she'd just become visible. Elijah visited every day after that. Amina tried to stop him. She created diversions, locked doors, invented errands. Nothing worked. The lonely man needs me, Elijah would say with complete certainty. His heart is hurting, Mama. Can't you see? She couldn't, but apparently her son could. On the fourth day, Amina brought the soup herself. Do-hyun was sitting up, a change from the previous weeks. His color looked slightly better. The hollowness in his cheeks seemed less severe. Elijah sat beside him, showing something on a tablet. This is called AO, the boy explained. It's a counting game from Nigeria. Grandma taught me before she went to heaven. Do-hyun studied the screen with genuine interest. The strategy seems complex. It's easy. You just have to think 3 moves ahead. Spoken like someone who's mastered it. Elijah grinned. Practice makes perfect. That's what Mama always says. Amina set the tray down quietly. Do-hyun's gaze shifted to her. The observation in his eyes made her uncomfortable. He noticed too much. Your son has been educating me on Nigerian culture. I apologize if he's been. Don't. The word wasn't harsh, but it stopped her immediately. He's the only person in this house who treats me like a human being. I won't accept apologies for that. Amina didn't know how to respond. Do-hyun looked at the covered tray. The same soup? It's good for healing. The doctors would disagree. The doctors left. A beat of silence. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps. Or respect. Yes, he said quietly. They did. He lifted the cover and actually ate. Elijah watched with satisfied triumph.
See?
I told you Mama's cooking is magic. It seems so. Do-hyun's eyes met Amina's over the rim of the bowl. The tattoo on his collarbone was visible through his partially open robe, dark patterns that seemed to pulse with old stories.
Thank you, he said.
2 simple words. But the way he said them made her breath catch. After finishing, Do-hyun leaned back against the pillows. Your son mentioned his father. That he's not present. Amina stiffened. That's not something I discuss. Forgive me. He looked genuinely apologetic, an expression she had known his face could make. I overstepped. Elijah, oblivious to the tension, yawned widely. Mama, I'm tired. Can we stay here a little longer? Before Amina could refuse, Do-hyun spoke. There's a sitting room adjacent to this chamber. He could rest there while you continue your duties. I couldn't.
Please.
The words seemed difficult for him. Foreign. Let me offer this small hospitality. It's been a long time since this house felt alive. Amina looked at her sleeping son. Looked at the dying man who seemed to draw strength from a child's presence. Looked at her own tangled emotions. 1 hour, she said finally. Do-hyun nodded, something like gratitude crossing his features. She carried Elijah to the adjacent room, settling him on an antique chaise beneath a cashmere throw. When she returned, Do-hyun was watching the Seoul skyline through the massive windows. You could have fired me, she said quietly. When Elijah first entered, You could have thrown us both out. I could have. Why didn't you? He was silent for a long moment. Because your son looked at me without fear. His voice was rough.
Exposed.
And I'd forgotten what that felt like. 2 weeks passed. Do-hyun's health improved incrementally, enough to sit, to walk short distances, to hold conversations without exhaustion stealing his words. The doctors called it unexplainable. Minjun called it inconvenient. Late one night, Amina couldn't sleep. She developed a routine of checking the mansion's perimeter, ensuring doors were locked, security systems armed. With reduced staff, someone had to maintain vigilance. She paused outside the study, where Minjun had established his temporary office. Voices filtered through the heavy door. The overseas accounts need to transfer before he regains capacity. And if he recovers? Minjun's laugh was cold. Recovery isn't an option. Amina's blood chilled. Adjust his medication.
Gradually.
Nothing that shows on blood work. The doctors already expect deterioration. What about the maid? Her son is always in that room. Handle it. Make her position untenable. Amina pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing. She'd suspected something. Now she knew. Minjun wasn't simply managing affairs. He was orchestrating a murder. She moved silently back through the corridors, her mind racing. Who could she tell? The police would laugh at a maid accusing a powerful executive. Do-hyun's organization was compromised. Anyone she approached might be loyal to Minjun. She reached her quarters, checked that Elijah was safely asleep, and stood at the window. Leaving was the smart choice. Taking her son and disappearing before Minjun made good on his threats. She'd survived worse. Rebuilt before. Could do it again. But Do-hyun's face surfaced in her memory. The way he smiled at her son. The way he'd thanked her for simple soup. The way he'd asked permission instead of demanding. He was dying. And apparently someone wanted to make sure he stayed dead. Amina closed her eyes. She'd told herself for years that she wouldn't get involved. Wouldn't care. Wouldn't let anyone's problems become her own. But Elijah saw something worth saving in that man. And her son had never been wrong about people. Minjun's research arrived 3 days later. He sat in the study, spreading documents across the mahogany desk like cards in a complicated game. Amina Okoye. Born in Lagos. Educated at the University of Lagos, top of her class. Married young to a businessman with international connections. Minjun's eyebrows rose at the wedding photos. Designer gowns. Embassy receptions. A life of obvious wealth. Then everything changed. Her husband's business collapsed spectacularly. Fraud charges. International warrants. He disappeared, leaving Amina with crushing debt and a 2-year-old son. She'd sold everything. Moved from country to country. Eventually landed in Seoul with nothing but a work visa and determination. A maid's position at the Kong estate had been pure coincidence. Or was it? Minjun flipped to the final page. His breath caught. 5 years ago, Amina Okoye had participated in an international bone marrow donation program. An anonymous recipient in Seoul. The match was perfect. The recipient's identity was sealed, but Minjun had resources beyond normal channels. His contact had penetrated the hospital's records. The recipient of Amina Okoye's bone marrow donation was Kong Do-hyun. Minjun leaned back, processing the implications. During Do-hyun's first illness, before anyone knew how sick he truly was, an anonymous donor had saved his life. The organization had never identified them, had never been able to repay the debt. And now that same donor was working as a maid in his house. Cooking soup that seemed to strengthen him. Letting her child bring light into his darkness. Completely unaware of the connection. This was either cosmic coincidence or the most elaborate long-game manipulation Minjun had ever encountered. Either way, Amina Okoye was now significantly more dangerous than he'd assumed. She had to go. Amina felt the shift before she could name it. Staff members who'd been friendly grew cold. Supplies she'd ordered stopped arriving. Her access codes mysteriously failed at random doors. She was being pushed out. But she couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until she figured out how to warn Do-hyun without endangering herself or Elijah. She found her answer in an unexpected place. Do-hyun had begun walking short distances, always exhausted afterward, but mobile nonetheless. One afternoon, she discovered him in the garden, sitting on a stone bench beneath cherry blossoms that refused to bloom in the strange weather. Elijah sat beside him, chattering about a bird he'd spotted. Mama says that kind of bird flies all the way from Africa. Can you imagine? Your mother knows many things. She's the smartest. Elijah's loyalty was absolute. Did you know she used to wear fancy dresses and go to big parties? Do-hyun's gaze sharpened. Did she? Before everything got hard, I saw pictures. She looked like a princess. Amina approached, heart racing. Elijah smiled up at her. I was telling him about the old photos, Mama. I heard. She kept her voice steady. Perhaps we should let Mr. Kong rest. He's not tired. He said so. Do-hyun's attention remained on her. The observation felt different now, more personal, more intentional. Your son has been enlightening me about your background. Elijah exaggerates. He said you were a princess. Children's imaginations are vivid. He also said everything got hard. Do-hyun's voice softened. What happened? Amina hesitated. The truth was complicated, painful, nothing she'd shared with anyone in years. But something about this moment, the dying man who was slowly returning to life, the garden silent around them, her son's trusting presence, made words surface unbidden. I trusted someone who didn't deserve it. Lost everything. Started over. With a child depending on you. Yes. Alone. Yes. Do-hyun was quiet for a long moment. That requires strength most people don't possess. Or desperation. Perhaps both. Elijah tugged at his mother's hand. Can we stay outside longer? Mr. Do-hyun was going to show me where the koi pond used to be. Used to be? Do-hyun's expression flickered with something like grief. I had it filled in years ago. After?
He didn't finish.
Amina didn't push. Some wounds weren't ready for exposure. That night, Elijah saw something strange. He'd woken thirsty, padding through darkened corridors toward the kitchen. The house didn't scare him. Nowhere scared him when he knew the good people inside. Passing the medical supply room, he noticed the door was open. A figure moved inside. Not a doctor. Not a nurse. The sharp-faced man who always looked at Mama with cold eyes. Elijah froze, small body pressing against the wall. Min-jun held a medicine bottle up to the light. He studied it carefully, then pulled something from his pocket, a smaller vial. He poured liquid from one container into another. Slowly.
Carefully.
Like someone who didn't want to be caught. Elijah's breath came faster. He didn't understand exactly what was happening. But he understood wrong. This felt wrong. He watched Min-jun seal the bottles, return them to their proper place, and leave through a different door. Elijah waited until the footsteps faded. Then he crept into the medical room. The bottles sat on the shelf, innocent and identical. But Elijah remembered which ones the man had touched. He also remembered where Mama kept the backup supplies, the ones she'd brought from their own quarters, just in case. Moving with surprising care, he made a decision. When Amina found him the next morning, he was back in bed, sleeping peacefully. She never knew about his midnight mission. But Do-hyun's morning medication came from a different source entirely, and his improvement continued. Do-hyun's recovery defied medical explanation. The doctors returned, summoned by Min-jun's increasingly frantic calls, and ran tests that made no logical sense. His blood work is improving. The autoimmune markers are decreasing. That's impossible with his current medication regimen. I know, but look at the numbers. Min-jun watched from the corner of the examination room, his face carefully blank. Something was wrong. The medication should have accelerated deterioration, not reversed it. Unless someone was interfering. His gaze tracked to the door, where Amina waited with Do-hyun's afternoon soup. The maid. It had to be. She was either remarkably lucky or remarkably dangerous. Either way, she'd outlived her usefulness. You need to leave. Amina looked up from the laundry she was folding. Minjun stood in the doorway of the service quarters, backlit by fluorescent light. "Excuse me? Your employment here is terminated. Effective immediately." He produced an envelope. Severance compensation. Quite generous, considering. Amina's hand stilled. "I haven't received notice from Mr. Kong. Mr. Kong is incapacitated. I'm acting with full authority. He seemed quite capable this afternoon, when we discussed the garden restoration." Minjun's expression tightened. "You overstep, Ms. Okoye. I'm simply stating facts." He stepped closer, crowding her space. "Let me state some facts. You're a foreign worker with an expired visa, a child you can barely support, and no connections in this country. If I make one phone call, immigration removes you within the week." Amina felt fear coil in her stomach. But she'd survived worse. "Mr. Kong specifically requested my continued presence. Mr. Kong doesn't know what's good for him. Perhaps. But I believe he's still the one giving orders in this house." The silence stretched. Minjun's composure cracked slightly, just a flash of anger beneath the polished surface. "You're making a mistake. I've made many. I survived them all." He turned without another word, but the threat lingered in the air long after he disappeared. Amina sank onto the nearest surface, hands trembling. She needed to warn Do-hyun, tonight, before Minjun escalated. The East Wing corridor felt longer at night. Amina moved silently. Elijah's sleeping form settled safely in their quarters with the door locked and a chair wedged beneath the handle. She didn't knock. The door was unlocked. Do-hyun sat in the darkness, silhouetted against the Seoul skyline. He'd clearly been expecting someone. "You should be sleeping," he said without turning. "So should you. Sleep and I haven't been friends for many years." He gestured to a chair nearby. "Sit." She remained standing. "Mr. Kong." Do-hyun. "I'm sorry." He turned, the city lights illuminating the angular planes of his face, the tattoo visible along his neck, dark ink disappearing beneath his robe. "My name is Do-hyun. You've earned the right to use it." Amina's pulse quickened. This felt different, more personal than any previous interaction. "I need to tell you something. About Minjun's plans to accelerate my death?" His voice was almost casual. "I'm aware." She stared at him. "You know. I've suspected for weeks. The medication adjustments. The financial transfers. The systematic isolation." He met her gaze directly. "What I didn't know was who I could trust. And now I know." The implications settled over her like a weight. "You've been testing me, observing. There's a difference. You let your second-in-command plot your murder while you observed?" A ghost of a smile crossed his features. "I needed to identify all the players. Minjun has allies throughout the organization. Moving against him prematurely would have been fatal. And moving against him now? Also potentially fatal. But I have something I lacked before." "What?" He held her gaze. "Someone worth surviving for." The air between them shifted. Amina felt something dangerous stir in her chest, something she'd thought long dead. "Your son," Do-hyun continued quietly, "sees good in people. You said it's his gift. But it's more than that. He recognizes authenticity. Beneath fear, beneath reputation, beneath the armor people wear, he sees truth. He's a child. Children often see clearest." Do-hyun rose slowly, still weak, but steady. He crossed to where she stood, close enough that she could see the exhaustion etched in his features, and something else beneath it. Determination. "You could have left," he said. "When the money stopped, when Minjun threatened you, when staying became dangerous. You could have taken your son and disappeared. No one would have blamed you. Elijah wouldn't leave." "Is that the only reason?" Amina looked away. The truth was more complicated than a child's loyalty. Somewhere in the past weeks, watching this feared man soften under her son's attention, seeing glimpses of humanity beneath the ruthless reputation, she'd started to care. And caring was dangerous. "I know about the bone marrow," Do-hyun said suddenly. Amina's blood froze. "What?" "5 years ago. Anonymous donation that saved my life." The doctors never identified the match. His voice dropped lower. Minjun's research revealed it was you. She stepped back. I never. You didn't know. The donation was anonymous. You thought it was a stranger receiving your cells. His eyes held hers with impossible intensity. But it wasn't. It was me. The room spun slightly. You mean? Your bone marrow is why I survived my first illness. He stepped closer again, eliminating the distance she'd created. And now you're here in my house, feeding me soup that somehow reverses what modern medicine couldn't touch. Letting your son remind me what living actually feels like. His hand rose, hovering near her face, without quite touching. Tell me, Amina, do you believe in fate? She couldn't breathe. I don't. I didn't either. His voice was barely above a whisper. But you make me wonder. Minjun moved his timeline forward. Within 3 days, he'd consolidated control of the organization's most critical operations. Financial accounts transferred. Loyalty tests completed. Those who hesitated were removed, quietly, professionally. All that remained was the final step. The boss has regained enough strength to hold meetings, his primary contact reported. He's summoned the senior members for tomorrow. Minjun's jaw tightened. Who called this meeting?
He did. Directly.
Something about addressing leadership concerns. This was wrong. Du Hyun shouldn't have the strength for power plays. Shouldn't have the clarity to see through the isolation. Shouldn't have anyone trustworthy enough to help him organize resistance. Unless the maid. She'd warned him. She'd been working against Minjun all along. Cancel the meeting, Minjun ordered. Sir, claim a security threat. Move the boss to the secondary location for his protection. And find the maid. What should we do with her? Minjun's eyes were flat.
Cold.
Make her disappear. The attack came at dusk. Amina was in the kitchen, preparing Du Hyun's evening meal, when the lights died. Emergency systems should have activated immediately. They didn't. Darkness swallowed the mansion. She grabbed a knife from the counter. Small, practical, familiar. Elijah. Her son wasn't in their quarters. He was upstairs. With Du Hyun. Amina ran. The corridors felt endless in the darkness, sounds echoing strangely off marble walls. She could hear movement, footsteps, voices, the controlled efficiency of professionals. They were coming. She burst into the east wing to find chaos. Du Hyun stood near the windows, leaning heavily on his cane, but standing. 4 men surrounded him, not his loyal guards, but Minjun's chosen operatives. And, between them, Elijah. Her 7-year-old son stood in front of the dying man, arms spread wide, small body trembling but resolute. You can't hurt my friend. Everything stopped. One of the men laughed. Move, kid.
No.
I said move. Elijah's voice didn't waver. My mama says you can tell good people from bad people by how they treat the ones who can't fight back. You're all bad people. The lead operative raised his hand. Touch him, and every man in this room dies tonight. Du Hyun's voice cut through the darkness like ice. He shouldn't have been capable of threat anymore. Shouldn't have had the strength to command. But something had shifted. Standing behind the child who treated him like a human being, watching a 7-year-old show more courage than men twice his size. Something ancient and dangerous woke in his eyes. Mr. Kong. The lead operative's smile faltered. You're in no condition. You misunderstand the situation. Du Hyun's voice dropped even lower. My men disabled the security to create confusion. Your men walked into a trap. Sounds of scuffling erupted elsewhere in the mansion.
Shouts.
Impacts. Silence. The operative's expression shifted from confidence to uncertainty. Minjun said. Minjun, Du Hyun interrupted softly, will answer for his choices. As will everyone who helped him. His gaze moved to Amina, standing frozen in the doorway with a knife clutched in white-knuckled hands. Take Elijah. The safe room beneath the library. You know where. But
now.
She moved instinctively, grabbing her son and running. Behind her, she heard Du Hyun's final words to the men who'd threatened her child. On your knees. All of you. Minjun realized his failure the moment the lights returned. His operatives were kneeling in the main hall, disarmed and terrified. Do-hyun stood at the top of the main staircase, supported by two men who'd never wavered in their loyalty. Men Minjun had thought properly neutralized. The tattoo on his wrist was visible beneath the surgical wrappings, a stark reminder of the blood oaths he'd taken and never broken. You made two mistakes. Do-hyun's voice echoed through the mansion. The first was underestimating how much of my organization remains loyal, not to my power, but to my word. He descended slowly, each step deliberate. The second was threatening a child. Minjun's composure cracked. The organization needed strong leadership. You were dying. I was recovering.
Slowly.
Painfully, but recovering. Do-hyun reached the bottom of the stairs. You simply couldn't wait. The maid she influenced. The maid, Do-hyun interrupted icily, showed more loyalty in her silence than you showed in 15 years. She knew you were trying to kill me and risk her life to warn me. What did you risk? Minjun's mouth opened.
Closed.
Nothing, Do-hyun answered for him. You risked nothing. You positioned yourself to inherit an empire you didn't build, using methods I would never have condoned. He gestured, and his men brought Minjun to his knees. The organization isn't yours. It never was. Minjun's face twisted. What will you do? Kill me? Have me arrested? Neither. Do-hyun's smile held no warmth. I'm going to destroy every alliance you've built. Dismantle every account you've accessed. Turn every man who served you into an enemy. He leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. And then I'm going to let you live with the knowledge that everything you wanted is forever out of reach. Because of a maid. And her 7-year-old son. The following days passed in a blur of reorganization. Do-hyun's remaining loyal officers moved quickly, consolidating control, neutralizing Minjun's allies, restoring order to an organization that had nearly fractured. Amina stayed. She told herself it was temporary. Until things stabilized. Until she could find other employment, another country, another fresh start. But every evening, she brought soup to the East Wing. And every evening, Do-hyun was waiting. Your son saved my life. They sat in the garden, watching Elijah chase butterflies through newly planted flowers. The koi pond had been restored. Do-hyun had ordered it the day after the attack. He saved your life before that, Amina said quietly. The medication. He switched the bottles. Do-hyun's expression flickered with surprise. He knew. He knew something was wrong. He's perceptive. He's extraordinary. Silence stretched between them. Comfortable now. Familiar. I'm planning to leave, Amina said finally. Once things are stable, find something normal. Safe. Do-hyun's jaw tightened slightly. Of course. Elijah needs stability. Schools, friends, a life that doesn't involve criminals, complications. He turned to face her, the afternoon light catching his features, still gaunt, still tired, but stronger than she'd ever seen him. What if I asked you to stay? Her breath caught. As what? As whatever you want to be. His voice was low, intense. Maid.
Guest. Partner.
Whatever title makes this acceptable, I'll give it. It's not about titles. Then what is it about? She looked at him, really looked, saw the man beneath the reputation, the loneliness beneath the power, the genuine warmth when he watched her son. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Any of this. Romance with a man who terrifies half the country. Co-parenting with someone whose world is dangerous? Yes. I'm working on that. He reached out, fingers brushing hers tentatively. The empire I built, it's changing. Legitimate businesses replacing the shadows. Foundations for children who started where I did. Something Elijah could be proud of. Because of him? Because of both of you. His hand closed around hers. Stay, he said simply. Not forever if you can't. Not if it hurts you. But stay long enough to see what this could become. Amina watched her son laugh, sunlight catching his face. Watched the man beside her. Dying weeks ago, alive now, transformed by kindness he'd never expected. 1 month, she said finally. Then we reassess. The smile that crossed his features was the most genuine she'd ever seen. I can work with a month. A month became 2. 2 became 6. Amina stopped counting. The mansion transformed around them. Staff returned, properly vetted this time, loyal to restoration rather than dissolution. The gardens bloomed. The koi pond teemed with life. And Do-hyun became someone different.
Not softer, exactly.
Still capable of the cold authority that had built his empire. But balanced now. Tempered. He attended Elijah's school events. He learned to cook Nigerian dishes from Amina's recipes. He read bedtime stories in a voice that no longer sounded like a stranger's. The organization shifted too. Charitable foundations replaced smuggling routes. Scholarships funded students from backgrounds like his own. Anti-trafficking initiatives dismantled the networks he'd once tolerated as costs of business. It wasn't redemption, exactly, but it was something close. Amina found herself drawn into the work, not as an employee, but as a partner. Her education, long dormant, proved valuable in structuring the legitimate businesses that replaced shadow operations. She sat in meetings now, made decisions, was introduced as Do-hyun's partner. People will talk, she said one evening, reviewing foundation proposals. People always talk. They'll say you've gone soft. I have. He looked up from his own documents, the tattoo on his wrist visible beneath rolled-back sleeves. Is that a problem? For a man in your position? Maybe. I'm not in that position anymore. Or I won't be. Another year of transition, and the organization becomes entirely legitimate. He crossed her side of the desk. Then I'm simply a very wealthy man with questionable history and excellent taste in women. She tried to suppress her smile. That's not. It's exactly true. He leaned down, his face close to hers. You changed everything, Amina. You and Elijah. Before you, I was content to die in that room. After you, you had something to live for? I had someone worth living for. His eyes held hers. 2 someones, actually. The kiss, when it came, was gentle, then not so gentle. Then they moved toward the private quarters, and the door closed behind them. Fade to black. Happiness, as Amina should have remembered, made people vulnerable. Min-jun had been stripped of power, publicly humiliated, reduced to nothing. But he hadn't been eliminated. That was Do-hyun's mistake. Months later, Amina received an anonymous message. Your son walks to school alone on Wednesdays. Beautiful boy. Looks just like his mother. The fear that flooded her was primal. Absolute. She found Do-hyun in his study, showed him the message, and watched his expression transform into something she hadn't seen since the night of the attack.
Cold. Deadly. Controlled.
Where is Elijah now?
School.
Security detail I arranged.
Double it. Triple it.
I want eyes on him every moment until this is resolved. He was already making calls, voice clipped and commanding. Amina watched him mobilize resources she'd tried to forget existed. The shadow network never fully dismantled, merely hibernating. You're going after Min-jun. I'm eliminating a threat. He was your second in command for 15 years. Part of your family, in a way. Do-hyun's gaze met hers, and she saw the truth there. He threatened my real family. That changes everything. They found Min-jun in a safe house he thought no one knew about. He was alone, disheveled, drunk on bitterness and expensive whiskey. When Do-hyun entered, he barely looked up. Finally came to finish it. I came to end this. How depends on your next words. Min-jun laughed hollowly. What's left to negotiate? You took everything. You tried to take my family. Your family? The word dripped with contempt. A maid and her bastard child? That's what the great Kong Do-hyun chose over an empire. Do-hyun crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate. That maid saved my life when you were trying to end it. That child showed more courage than men twice his size. He stopped directly in front of Min-jun. They're worth more than every cent of the empire you tried to steal. Sentimental fool. Perhaps. Do Hyun's voice dropped. But I'm a sentimental fool with enough resources to make you disappear forever.
Or
You leave. Tonight. Take what money you've hidden and yes, I know about the accounts and vanish. Never contact anyone from this life again. Never threaten anyone connected to me. Minjun stared at him. You're offering mercy? I'm offering survival. Take it or don't. The silence stretched. Finally, Minjun reached for a nearby duffel bag, already packed. Already prepared for running. This isn't over. Yes, Do Hyun said quietly, it is. Minjun left through the back door. He was never seen again. Six months later, Elijah's school held its annual Parents' Day in a gymnasium decorated with student artwork and hopeful posters. Amina sat in a metal folding chair, surrounded by other parents, teachers, engineers, office workers. Normal people with normal lives. And, beside her, Do Hyun. He wore simple clothes. No visible security detail. No expensive car parked conspicuously outside. Just a man attending his stepson's school event. Elijah spotted them from the stage where children were gathering for a presentation. His face lit up like sunshine. He waved vigorously with both hands. Do Hyun waved back, a gesture that would have seemed impossible a year ago. The feared crime lord responding to a child's enthusiasm like any proud father figure. Amina leaned into his shoulder. He's going to be impossible after this. Impossible. He'll want you at every event, every game, every class play. Good. Do Hyun's arms settled around her shoulders. I plan to be there. The presentation started. Children singing off-key, reciting poems with adorable seriousness, displaying projects about families and community. When Elijah's turn came, he stepped to the microphone with complete confidence. My family project is about people who find each other. He held up a drawing, 3 figures standing together beneath a Korean African pattern sun. This is my mom. She's the bravest person I know. This is my new dad. He was really sick, but now he's better. And this is me. Amina's eyes burned with tears. Do Hyun's hand tightened on her shoulder. My mom says families aren't just about blood. Elijah continued. They're about people who choose each other, who stay when things are hard, who make each other better. He grinned at his parents in the audience. I chose my family, and they chose me back. The audience applauded. Amina wiped her eyes. Do Hyun sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable to everyone except the woman who'd learned his tells. She saw the moisture gathering at his lashes. She said nothing. Some emotions didn't need words. After the presentation, Elijah launched himself at both of them, wrapping small arms around their necks simultaneously. Did you like it? Was it good? My teacher said. I was very articulate. It was perfect, Amina said, kissing his forehead. You did well, Do Hyun added, voice slightly rough. Elijah beamed. Now can we get ice cream? You promised. I did promise. 2 scoops. Don't push your luck. They walked out of the gymnasium together. A family that shouldn't have worked, formed from tragedy and coincidence and one child's fearless compassion. The sole sunlight caught them at the doorway. For a moment, they were just silhouettes against the brightness. Mother.
Child.
Father.
Complete.
1 year later, the wedding was small. Intentionally small. Amina hadn't wanted spectacle. She'd had enough of grand events in her first marriage, enough of empty ceremony masking hollow connection. This time, she wanted truth. They married in the restored garden, beneath cherry blossoms that had finally bloomed after years of dormancy. Elijah served as ring-bearer, carrying the bands on a silk pillow embroidered with both Korean and Nigerian symbols. Do Hyun wore a simple suit, dark, tailored, the tattoo on his wrist visible as he took her hands. Amina wore white, but Nigerian-styled, a dress her grandmother would have recognized, her mother would have approved. The vows weren't elaborate. I choose you, she said simply. Every day, every challenge, every joy. I choose you, he echoed. And your son. And whatever comes next. Elijah interrupted before they could kiss. Does this mean I can call you Dad now? The audience, barely 30 people, all carefully chosen, laughed softly. Do-hyun looked at the boy who'd wandered into his sick room and refused to see a monster. You can call me whatever you want. Even the great mighty Dragon King? Let's stick with Dad. They kissed as the cherry blossoms fell around them. Elijah made exaggerated, disgusted noises. The guests applauded. And somewhere in the distance, a bird sang. The kind Elijah had once said flew all the way from Africa. Later, alone in their chambers, Amina traced the tattoo along Do-hyun's collarbone, the intertwined symbols she'd come to understand. What happens now? She asked. Now we live, he said simply. Something I'd forgotten how to do. And the organization? Fully legitimate by next year. The board of directors takes over. I become an investor, a consultant. Someone with a very interesting past and a very boring future. She smiled. You'll hate being boring. I'll have you. I'll have Elijah. I'll have grandchildren to spoil someday. His arms tightened around her. Boring sounds perfect. Outside, stars appeared over Seoul. Inside, a family slept peacefully. The dying king had found his reason to live. The maid had found her home. And the child who saw good in everyone had been right all along. Nobody cared for the dying Korean mafia boss. Until a maid's child saw past the fear, past the reputation, past the walls built from decades of violence and isolation. A 7-year-old walked into a forbidden room with a book and a smile. And changed everything. Because sometimes, the most powerful force in the world isn't money or fear or influence. Sometimes it's simply kindness, offered freely, to someone who'd forgotten it existed. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps create more stories about love, redemption, and the unexpected moments that transform our lives.